Four Florida educators have now died from COVID-19. This after Governor Desantis has banned the mask mandate in schools. Ben and I will break this down, but first I want you guys to take a look at the latest report on what's happening in Florida.
Takes 4 Florida educators working in that same school district where this fight is going on just died from the virus within 1 day of each other this week. That's what's going on. Now DeSantis is partially caving. His office saying, well, the threat was empty anyway. DeSantis doesn't even have the power to withhold those salaries, although that's what he publicly threatened. Politico says it's a tacit acknowledgement that he legally can't do what he was threatening to do, as you just saw in some of those clips. Now, DeSantis still says he won't allow schools at a local level to require masks, but he cannot financially retaliate against these precautions. 2 school districts are already on their way to defying DeSantis, regardless of what the courts decide. We are seeing the beginning of a reckoning. Where it goes from here.
So now we have Governor Desantis, who has issued this ban on mask mandates, leaving 4 educators dead. And there were some empty threats. DeSantis made to try to discourage people from mandating masks. And we just heard there in that latest report, he doesn't even have the power to fulfill those threats. And now schools are looking at defying, the mask mandate or the ban on the mask mandate.
Yeah. I think one of the things that we have to take in consideration is that Ron DeSantis knows full well that while he did not have the power to execute that threat, the impact of that threat would be more concentration of children and students into classrooms. And so Ron DeSantis is literally a part of the death cult that is getting people killed. And I would hate to be a politician when a parent realizes that the reason their child is not with them for Christmas is because they were the politician that lied and gave the American people the false sense of security when we are facing the Delta variant is doing so much more damage than last year. And yet we're acting as though we don't know what's going on. And that's because we have political leaders like Ron DeSantis.
And there's something to be said, I think, as the governor, who's overseeing an entire state, issuing orders that contradict best practices recommended by the health department. I mean, because he's totally going against the advice of the CDC, the advice of the Florida Health Department, and really out there on his own, saying that parents deserve to have a choice. But if one parent, if their choice is going to leave an educator dead, why would we allow parents to have that choice? If one parent's choice to not have their child wear a mask is going to leave another student dead, why would we give them that choice?
Because we put this absurd, it's not as though Republicans are actually concerned with choice. Let's be sure, right? That's the red herring. They don't care about choice anymore. In this situation, they do a woman's choice over her body. What they care about are their donors. What they care about is the fact that they need these children to be in schools so parents can go to work and parents can go to consume, so that their investors and that their donors can make their quarterly profit margin. So it literally, what you're saying is absolutely the case. What they're trying to do makes no sense, except when you look through the lens of them doing what's in the best interest of capitalism versus the people.
Now, I want you guys to hear from Molly Jong-Fast. She's an editor at the Daily Beast. I thought her perspective on this was very interesting. And also, Ben, now we're hearing more people in the media landscape talk about this. Usually, those of us who work in the media space don't really take a side, so to say, because you're supposed to be neutral and you're supposed to tell both sides of the story. But I think it's become very clear with COVID-19 here, there's not two sides to this story. This is another case where there's right and there's wrong. Take a listen at Molly here.
That is depressing. And Molly, you wrote a piece for the Daily Beast about Republican governors like Ron DeSantis in Florida, Greg Abbott in Texas, who have been railing against stricter COVID protocols, even as cases surge. And you say, we'll put this up on screen, it took a lot of stupid to get Florida and Texas to this dark place, which is why the MAGA propagandists are trying to suggest, without much evidence, that this is about an unvaccinated wave at the border, when it appears to be about unvaccinated Americans in a country with enough vaccine doses to go around, harming their own health and helping spread the virus and helping it continue to mutate in the process. At what point do voters wake up and say, hey, maybe this has more to do with all the anti-public health rhetoric coming from our elected officials, Molly?
I don't know. I mean, you have a Republican Party that's running contrary to public health, right? They're against things like masking and vaccines, which are really simple things. You know, you have the rest of the world dying for a COVID vaccine. You have America literally drowning in vaccine. And Republicans like, you know, Ron DeSantis and, Greg Abbott are just, kind of trying to poke holes in the vaccine, making, mandates against masking. I mean, it's just insane. And you see, I mean, if you look at history, the times when government has gone against public health during a pandemic, it never ends well.
Yeah.
It never ends well. It never ends well. And that's kind of, it feels like where we're headed right now.
Absolutely. It feels as though we're in the worst timeline imaginable, where the people who are in charge are dead set on getting as many people killed as possible. Let's be sure, America, 630,000 people did not have to die. And right now, the number of people who are dying every day, we're getting close to 1,000 people a day who are dying. They literally did not have to die because the majority of them are unvaccinated, some 99%. But by them being unvaccinated and the mask mandates being challenged and all of the ignorance that's going on in our media and our political leaders, we are faced with the proposition of being in this pandemic for years to come. And that is something that we need to really take in consideration when it's time to get rid of these people. I'm trying to say it as nicely as possible, but we have to get the sociopaths out of power.
And I'm looking at the numbers here. They're updated daily. Yesterday, 43,000 new cases compared to on Friday, 187,000 new cases. And what I'm seeing as I've been following these numbers, I followed them very closely at the very beginning of the pandemic, and then it just got to be overwhelming. But once the variants started circulating, I started paying attention to the numbers again. And one of the patterns I've noticed is during the week, the numbers skyrocket when people are going back to work, when kids are going to school. And then over the weekend, they go way down. So, I mean, comparison on Friday, 187,000 new cases in comparison to Sunday, 43,000. That's just a fraction of the cases. And that's what we realized during the lockdown, was that you could really curve the numbers by asking people to just simply stay at home. And so to see these numbers on the incline again, I mean, this is it's parallel. It's parallel to the beginning of the pandemic, the way that these numbers are spiking. So why government isn't moving towards another lockdown? Not that I'm in favor of it or I want it, but if it's going to save lives, don't you think it's something that we should consider?
Absolutely. Listen, this gross idea of individualism during the pandemic is probably going to get 1 million Americans killed. I don't wish that. I don't hope that. But if we cannot come together and do some simple things that are a mild inconvenience to us, like staying home, wearing a mask, getting a vaccine, those simple things, if we don't have enough collectivism in us, enough tribe left in us to do, and black folks especially, listen, I do care about white folks and humanity in general, but the rate of black people who are getting the vaccine is terrifying. We have to take care of ourselves when we're living in a system that's so absurd that the political leaders are sending their followers to the slaughter like sheep.
Ben, and we, America, we're leading in the amount of new cases. When you compare the amount of new cases that we have to the amount of new cases across the world, this is definitely not something that we should be proud to be number one in. And the scientists, the medical professionals, they've laid it out there. The vaccine works. They've laid it out there. Wearing a mask works. Staying at home works. Social distancing. All of these things. But yet still we have government officials who continue not even to just go against that, but to see DeSantis ban the mask mandate. And right. Florida is leading America in the amount of new cases. And so we shouldn't be surprised about that. But at some point, I'm hoping that there is intervention by the Biden administration because people are dying from the negligence of our political leaders. In Minnesota, right, where I am, our kids haven't gone back to school yet. I know in the South, a lot of the kids have already started to go back to school, but we continue to have these conversations about what are our options, to not have to have our kids in a classroom where we know even here where there's not a ban on the mask mandate, how many of these kids are really going to be wearing their masks the entire time they're in school anyways? It's hard enough to get them to keep their mask on just when you're at the grocery store, let alone sitting in a classroom for 8 hours. That's right. And the last thing I'll say here is I was talking to a good friend of mine yesterday. She just gave birth to her baby. The baby is about 10, 11 days old. She's not vaccinated. Oh. And she has a 13 and a 15-year-old who's also not vaccinated. And it terrified me because she's got this brand new baby, family traveling in from out of state, flying in. I don't know if they're vaccinated, but just the fact that her baby is now in this very vulnerable situation, living in a household full of people who are not vaccinated. So yeah, there's still a lot of people out here who are choosing not to get vaccinated. And you guys should check on your friends. And we had a very serious conversation, about her choice with her children, even going back to school at 13 and 15, not being vaccinated and being around all of those kids. Because her as an adult, she's doing her meetings by Zoom. She's not going out much. So she's still kind of operating under the same premise of being in a lockdown. But her kids are about to be around 300-400 other children, some who may be vaccinated, some who may not. And so her household now is going to be at higher risk, and her baby who cannot get vaccinated, right? So, man, there's all of these different components and variables. And my thought to her was just, hey, even if you're not comfortable getting the vaccine yet, at least go to, Whole Foods or GNC or somewhere that sells herbal supplements and start to give everybody immunity boosters. Because that way, if you get it, at least your body has what it needs to be equipped to fight it. But that still doesn't mean that you might not get hospitalized, right? So all of these different variables, Ben, I just, that situation there this weekend really took me back and really, it was kind of hard to confront.
I vacillate back and forth between angst with parents who may not have all the information that they need because the information is out there. But I don't take that path because our system is designed specifically to keep us from getting the information that we need by keeping us in silos, by keeping us so busy, and then the government provided a false sense of security. That's what I really want to land the plane on. Parents who are sending their kids back to school are doing so based on the false sense of security that came not only from the Trump administration, but also from the Biden administration, from Democrats and Republicans. I don't care what your political affiliation is in this. If you are a political leader and you led to the children going back to school, a pox on your house, because children are dying. And parents are trying to decide, how do I balance feeding my kids with keeping my kids in the day when my job is also requiring me to go back to work? Because there's so many people who don't even have the option of homeschooling because they're considered essential workers. Well, to that end, America has made the perfect conundrum where parents can't take care of their kids unless they put their kids' life at risk. And we're going to see the aftermath of that if this continues. But I hope, Georgia, that parents have seen what happened last week in the South and will refuse, absolutely refuse. I don't care about education can come. It will wait. It will be here. They can't get an education if they're dead.
That's true. There was a protest that we talked about last week where it looked like hundreds of people showed up saying that their child, their choice, basically threatening anybody who was saying that masks should be worn in schools. Very tense time. What we're learning now is potentially most of these people who were here at this protest were not even a part of the school district. I want you guys to take a listen to the County Teachers Union president. She was interviewed about the protesting that happened in her county and said that there were a lot of different signs, a lot of different observations she made that led her to believe that these people who are showing up, who are saying we don't want masks in the school, are not even a part of the school districts where they're showing up at.
How do you deal with that?
Well, they've come through our school board meetings a couple times. And, to be frank with you, Jim, I believe that they're not all parents. I believe it's a paid group that's out there. I saw some of them with flyers from the very, right-wing side. And they keep, having that same narrative. And when you try to rational with them or reason with them and just talk about, where their children go to school, they openly admit that their children don't even attend our Broward County public schools. They didn't know the names of our board members. They didn't know the name of our superintendent.
So people are just showing up almost like a protest caravanning to different school board meetings, causing a ruckus and posing as parents from the district saying we don't want our children to have to wear masks. Meanwhile, the real parents from the county of the real students who are going to be in the classrooms that are going to be affected by the decisions that are made by this school board meeting are sitting there and their voices aren't even being heard.
That's right. That's right. And that's the point. That's the plan. The entire agenda is to create a sense of consensus. It's manufacturing consent, not in the sense of the media where we normally consider that prospect, but it's the paid trolls that are organized to go around the country to make it seem like there's a national consensus against a mask mandate. I just want to pause and say the absurdity of it all. Put a damn mask on. All of these raggedy white supremacists who have a vested interest in undermining the stability of the United States because they see that the United States does not serve directly white supremacy only. It does serve white supremacy. But we saw on January 6th, the white supremacist channel in this country has gone to the point where they are willing to destabilize this country very directly through violence, through force, through insurrection, or through killing as many people as they can with the pandemic. And this is what they are doing. They are paid agitators going around the country in order to forward a right-wing agenda. And they see killing people in this pandemic as a viable path to destabilizing this country.
And I think that these are the same people who were at the Capitol on January 6th.
That's right.
The level of organization and their communication with one another to organize, to mobilize, and travel from city to city, county to county to these school board meetings is very parallel to the way that they organized to be in D.C. at the same time, the same place, and they were all on one accord. So I was not surprised to hear the teachers, president of the union there saying that she saw flyers for the right wing. But the question now that we should be asking ourselves, even outside of the pandemic, is what are they up to next? So if January 6th was, the plan for attacking the presidential election, and this is how they're responding to the pandemic, they're not going anywhere. These people are continuing to organize. They're continuing to plan. And then they're not only just trolling on Facebook anymore, they're showing up in real life.
Right. Just like anyone who was around or remember the Tea Party, that was not an authentic, organic movement. It was paid. It was astroturf. I just really need people to understand what we're dealing with. Here's the score. The people in power are either incompetent or directly complicit with the mass murder of 630,000 Americans who did not have to die from a pandemic. And we are going into, honestly, people are calling this the fourth wave. If you've been tracking it, I think it's really just a second wave. And it's certainly the wave of stupidity, because this is a wave that could have been avoided by people getting the vaccine.
Absolutely. And people who say it's the fourth wave, I think if you look at the numbers, you can see that there is, when there was an incline, there was almost 3 downturns so that it went back up. So that could count as why people are, saying that this is the fourth wave. But when you look at those numbers going down, those numbers went down in direct correlation with the lockdown.
That's right.
Again, I didn't enjoy being locked in my house, but I do think that we have a responsibility to be a part of the solution. And so when this all passes, if we're not a part of the solution, we have to acknowledge, Ben, like you said, we are a part of the problem. We've contributed to more than 600,000 people being killed. And then now when you start to see the increase in the amount of deaths among children, and to know that we're contributing to that. I posted last week about, and I don't post much about COVID. If you followed me throughout the entire pandemic, it wasn't something I talked a lot about. And I've been talking about it more because it's been impacting our children. And I think that we adults, parents, have a responsibility to ensure their safety in the world.
That's right.
But I made a post about it this last week, and one of the people who support me made a comment in regards to the 94,000 new cases among children. And she says, well, last year at this time, there were 200,000 cases among children. I don't know where she got her statistics, so I'm not 100% sure if that's actually accurate information, but let's just say it is. If that is accurate, should we feel good? Should we feel good about 94,000 children having COVID? Should we feel good about sending our kids to school? Because last year, if there were 200,000 cases and kids weren't even in school, there's 94,000 cases now, and all the kids aren't even back in school. And despite that, we're sending them back to school. So I was grappling with, like, what was the point? What is the point that you're trying to make here? Are you trying to say that we're better off this year because there's only 94,000 cases? And to me, it doesn't make sense, because that number is only going to double, if not quadruple, when we see the rest of America sending their kids back to school within the next month.
That's fascinating, because I've seen so many people come up with ridiculous lines like the one your supporter commented. And I think it's a way of people trying to find any path possible to not get angry, to not get outraged, to justify what's going on as if it is something that is normal. There's nothing normal about 94,000 children getting COVID-19 in a single week when it can completely have been avoided. There's nothing normal about 630,000 people being dead. We should be angry. There's so many things to be angry about that we have to compartmentalize. But I don't see that we should. The number one issue that we should be confronting right now is protecting our children. Why? I don't even know that I don't even understand why I have to fix that sentence to come out of my mouth. This should be natural. This is a primal, maternal, paternal instinct to protect your children. And the government, along with so many other people who are actively trying to undermine life itself, they have put us in a position where children are going to be dying over the next few weeks. I just don't understand. No, I do understand. I just realize it is so much easier for us to excuse away our anger so that we don't have the appropriate response. But the appropriate response to our children being killed, I digress.
I just hope that the real citizens of Florida, not the ones who are caravanning and showing up at school board meetings, but the real citizens. I hope the real citizens of Florida take a long, hard look at who they elected to be their governor, because I think he's made some very poor decisions that have cost people their lives, children, elderly, educators. 4 educators died from COVID this week, sending kids back to school. Ben, you and I, we've been talking about this now for the last 2 or 3 weeks, talking about the implications of sending children back into the classroom. And we didn't talk much about the impact that has on educators, the teachers, the janitors, the people who work in the cafeteria, the principals. People now are on the front lines. Our educators are essential workers now. They're on the front lines of this pandemic because they're going into schools full of children who are not old enough to be vaccinated. And so every single day when they go in there to educate our children, they're putting their life on the line so that your child can have an education. The least thing that you could do is send your child to school with a mask. But I do hope that the citizens, the real citizens of Florida, take a look at their governor and see what he's doing. And it might be time to ask him to step down. I went to his website. I'm not sure if we're able to pull it up. I just kind of threw it in there. There's a screenshot of his website where he's selling merchandise. He has T-shirts and stuff like that on his website, but he also has a beer can holder that says, "How the hell am I going to be able to drink a beer with a mask on? Governor Ron DeSantis."
This is what happens when you... I'm sorry. Go ahead, Georgia.
Look at this. He's selling cup holders. I just took a quick screenshot from my phone, so I know it's not the best one, but you can head over to his website and see it, rondesantis.com. He's selling cup holders for your beer cans, when you go to the ball game or when you're hanging out with your friends in the backyard. How the hell am I going to be able to drink beer with a mask on? Governor of Florida, people, right there at his finest.
This is the best that white supremacy can do. I feel bad for you all, but I feel even worse for all the families that are going to die because whiteness in this country is so committed to itself that it will elect the village idiot over and over again. Donald Trump, village idiot. Ron DeSantis, village idiot. Marjorie Taylor Greene, village idiot. And sociopaths who are more than happy to see your children die. And I guarantee you, every one of those persons that I enlisted, they're vaccinated and they won't be around someone without a mask, but they want your children to be.
Ben, I feel like we could go on and on about this. And, frankly, it just really makes me upset. And it makes me upset because I still haven't sent my children back to school, but we have like 2.5 more weeks before our kids go back to school here in Minnesota. And seeing the way that things are playing out in Florida, I'm getting anxious,
Yeah.
I'm getting anxious. I am not the parent who can homeschool. That is not my gift. Bless those who are able to take that on. And so we're scrambling, trying to figure out what are the other alternatives. What I learned here in the city that we're in is that the St. Paul School District is actually certified to do online learning. So this might be something, if you're watching and you're concerned about your children as well, check and see if your school's certified to do online learning anyways, like outside of distance learning, because some schools are certified to do school online. And so if your district is certified to do that, or if you have a neighboring district that's able to do that, that way you won't have to wait for the distance learning option to be mandated, but you can opt in to do school online without needing the government to do the right thing, right? So we're kind of hoping for that here. Our child, she doesn't go to the public school system. She's been at a charter school system. So we're looking to see maybe if we can switch her back just for that reason. It's tough.
It is.
It's really tough. All right, you guys, that's all for On the Clock this morning. Stick around for more on the Benjamin Dixon Show.
Good morning, y'all. God dang it. Coffee went down the wrong pipe. Good morning, everyone. Make sure that you stay tuned. We got one coming up on the Benjamin Dixon Show. Shout out to Georgia Fort for joining us this morning on the clock with Georgia Fort. Good morning, Georgia. Good morning, Brother Ben. Good morning, everyone. Get your tea, your coffee, whatever it is you need to get your morning going, y'all. It's going down the Benjamin Dixon Show. Let's get it.
Making you move, it sure looks good. Playing it cool like you know you should. Put a smile like one of a kind. And I can't get you off my mind. I'm running too hot, I need to cool me down. I'm flying so high, I don't see the ground. I'm running too hot, I need to cool me down. I'm flying so high, I don't see the ground.
Good morning, anyone. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I'm having a Monday today, bro. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Shout out to everybody in the chat room. Go ahead and get your coffee, tea, whatever it is you need. Good morning, y'all. Happy Monday.
And maybe we can't get any higher. But if you like to take a ride, you can discover what's behind it. Taking your time and I sure don't mind. But every inch of my body's getting wild, wild, wild. The way that you move is like a love machine. Come in my king and I'll be your queen. I'm running too hot, I need to cool me down. I'm flying so high, I don't see the ground. I'm running too hot, I need to cool me down. I'm flying so high, I don't see the ground. Baby, you set my soul on fire. Every morning and every evening, and maybe we can't get any higher. But if you like to take a ride, we can discover what's behind it.
Tell me what it is, don't tell me what it ain't. They try to throw salt, it just made the pressure raise. Going through a phase, gotta get myself out it. Don't talk about it, boy, they said you gotta be about it. So I be trying to face the world head on. Front seat riding, cruising down the meadows. Pedal to the meadow, cool breeze blowing down the windows. Calm trees, blowing trees, get that boy some headroom. On the interstate in traffic, but I swerve out. What's the moves for the night, what's the word?
Shout out, Brother Chuck Diesel. Happy birthday, Brother Chuck. Y'all dropped your birthday cakes, candles, lions, hearts, fires, smokes, everything in the chat room for our brother this morning. Happy birthday again, Brother Chuck Diesel. I got something coming up for you later on. You know, it's going to be like a beat of a song, but it's going to be for you, bro. Okay, happy birthday, Chuck Diesel.
You out for lunch, I'ma get you drunk, yeah, filling on your buns. Licks in the blunt, I got ash in my cup. All these girls showing up, but I don't give a fuck, cause you the one I want, girl, you the one I want. You the one I want, girl, you the one I want. Hey, come and show me love. Shorty wanna be a rider, and I'm feeling high, I can't deny it. She a bad joint named Maya, and when I seen her, man, she looked fire. She got me feeling higher than a sour, so I'm trying to feel how I feel inside her. I asked her what she doing, she like nada, so she just chillin' my get up in the shower.
Say, don't tell me to drop no cake in this chat this morning.
I just wanna live like a goon and Matata. I ain't got no time for no baby mama drama. All about my comments, my letters, no tomatoes.
But I gotta be specific.
Always cracking when they got up in they wallet. Ain't no really telling if we let us see tomorrow. Get it on my own, I ain't really tryna bar. So I stay fly, gotta dress up in designer. Tell me what it is.
Marquez, I wish, no.
What you want from me? What you want from me?
All right, y'all. It is time for more Benjamin Dixon show, y'all. So here we go. Stay tuned. Let's get it. Let's go. Good morning, y'all.
Mr. Speaker, members, I rise today really with a very heavy heart. One that is filled with sorrow for the families and the loved ones who were killed and injured this week. Only the most foolish and the most callous would not understand the grief that has really gripped our people and millions across the world. This unspeakable act on the United States has really forced me, however, to rely on my moral compass, my conscience, and my God for direction. September 11th changed the world. Our deepest fears now haunt us. Yet I am convinced that military action will not prevent further acts of international terrorism against the United States. This is a very complex and complicated matter. Now, this resolution will pass, although we all know that the president can wage a war even without it. However difficult this vote may be, some of us must urge the use of restraint. Our country is in a state of mourning. Some of us must say, let's step back for a moment. Let's just pause just for a minute and think through the implications of our actions today so that this does not spiral out of control. Now, I have agonized over this vote, but I came to grips with it today, and I came to grips with opposing this resolution during the very painful yet very beautiful memorial service. As a member of the clergy so eloquently said, as we act, let us not become the evil that we deplore. Thank you.
That is California Representative Barbara Lee back on September 14th, 2001, as she rightfully predicted the what we're seeing happening in Afghanistan. The war that seemed to never end finally has come to an end. And we're joined this morning by Captain Anthony Barnes and independent journalist Georgia Fort, because I want to dig into this a little bit more. And Captain Barnes, I want to thank you for joining us again this morning because of your experience and your expertise in this field. In fact, you were giving counsel at the highest levels of the government during 9/11. Could you speak about that very briefly in terms of that and how it all kind of led to where we are now in terms of Afghanistan?
Thank you, Ben. It's my pleasure to be with you again this morning. During the events of 9/11, 2001, I was active duty, a commander in the Navy. My position was the Deputy Director of Presidential Contingency Programs. And on that day, I found myself as the most senior military member in the White House during those events as they unfolded. And so all of my immediate chain of command was out of town, some with the president in Florida, some at an event in New York, and some participating in a exercise in Nebraska. But I found myself with Condoleezza Rice and with Vice President Cheney and some of the senior members of the White House team in the secure, undisclosed location in the White House during those events as they unfolded.
And so now let's fast forward now some 20 years later. And there has been there's so much here, so much for us to unpack. President Biden made it clear that he had every intention of bringing the troops home. Donald Trump made plans to bring the troops home. Barack Obama announced in his speech as president that he wanted to bring the troops home. And we're going to unpack this throughout this entire half hour. But what are your initial reactions to our reaction as the American people, the media, politicians, as we see the images coming out of Afghanistan as the Taliban very easily takes back control over their nation, over that nation, rather?
Well, I think it's important to begin at the beginning. Let's talk about why did we go into Afghanistan in the first place? It happened so long ago. It's many people have forgotten about why did we go in there? What were we doing there? And so after the events of 9/11, it became clear to us that Osama bin Laden was at the root of the attack on America. We went into Afghanistan because that's where the stronghold of Al Qaeda was. Now we have to remember, as this thing unfolded, there are so many different factions of this that we were fighting against. ISIS and various other warlords of Afghanistan that didn't want us to be in there in the first place. So we went in there to find the source of the attack on America. We knew that Afghanistan were harboring Al Qaeda at the time. And that's why we went in there to try and find Osama bin Laden. The problem that I have with the beginning of this was the stated objectives were not clear. Am I breaking up on you?
Well, you were a little, but we did get that one of your number one problems was that there was not a clear agenda, purpose, and there was concrete. The objectives were not clear. Go ahead, George.
The objectives were not clear. And in the military, when you have unclear objectives and it's not well known what it is your mission clearly stated, that's right, these kind of problems exist. It comes down to, when do you know when you've gotten where you're supposed to be? It happened in Iraq, the second Iraq. The first Iraq, we had very clearly stated objectives. We knew what we were going to accomplish. And we had an overwhelming force. One of the very basic tenets of war, don't go into a war that you don't have a clear advantage, overwhelming advantage from the beginning. So that's why in 100 hours, we marched in, went right down to Baghdad, accomplished the mission, and it was a very easy and simple operation. Now, the second time we went in there, not so much. Right. Not nearly as overwhelming of a force and not nearly as clearly stated objectives as well. And that's why being in Iraq was protracted as well.
And I appreciate that context, because I feel like so much time has passed. A lot of people have not followed the international news landscape to know how we got to where we are today. And so I'm curious if you can connect that backstory with where we are today and what we're seeing play out right now.
Well, I think, as President Biden has very clearly stated, he's the fourth president to have to deal with this issue that was started by a Republican regime. Bush 43 put us in there. I think rightfully so. There's a difference between playing a home game and playing an away game. And because the terrorist organizations were located in these foreign countries, we have to go and interdict them where they are. Otherwise, it becomes a home game. And America doesn't ever want to have to play a home game. We don't want to see fighting in the streets of Philadelphia with Al Qaeda forces going door to door. We don't ever want to see that. And that's not going to happen. But our military strategy is to interdict the enemy where they are. And so we have to go into places like Iraq and Afghanistan. But remember, historically, Afghanistan has been a warring kind of country for nearly their entire existence. There are it's because of these warring factions that have been there forever. Civilly, they haven't been able to have long periods of unrest. And then you hearken back to the 1970s, I think 1978, 79 timeframe, when at the time Soviet Union invaded from the north. You think about, why did that happen? Why did the Soviets go in to this country and invade? Well, look at the history books. It'll tell you that that's the southern border of what at the time was the Soviet Union. And they were concerned about these, you can call them religious extremists, if that's what you want to call them. But those that Muslim Islamic kind of a situation concerned them greatly. And so they felt they needed to protect their southern border. And so they sided with what they thought was the power group in the country at the time. And they also saw the U.S. gaining influence in Afghanistan, and that they were not going to settle for that. So they backed the group they thought was going to be successful. And as it turns out, even as powerful a military as the Russians or the Soviet Union at the time could not interdict their will on Afghanistan. So what does that tell you about history?
It repeats
Russia,
itself.
Soviet Union, and the U.S., the two most powerful, arguably China, but two of the most powerful military and governments in the world cannot interdict its force, its will on the people of Afghanistan.
I was thinking about this as we were discussing it behind the scenes, and we were talking about what would possess the. So there is the line of 9/11. But 9/11, and I think as you stated at the beginning of this, the lack of clear objectives going in and the mission creep, that's how it went from going to get Osama bin Laden as a result of 9/11 to being a 20-year war. But we also talked about there are other considerations why the United States was there beyond 9/11, and those implications money drives the American imperialism abroad. And I'm curious as to at what point will our military infrastructure and I guess it's depending on our civilian leadership, determine that it is not valuable for America to go across the globe and try to be the international police when we have so many issues at home. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, that's it. I looked for information about the dollar cost of this war. And everywhere I looked, it's difficult to actually nail that down. Because remember, from 2003 to 2011, we were fighting both Iraq and Afghanistan wars at the same time.
That's right.
So it's kind of hard to say which dollar went to which conflict. But no matter how you shake it, the number is in the trillions, $2 to $3 trillion.
Wow.
To date, and understanding that unlike Vietnam and unlike Korea, this war was not financed out of the U.S. Treasury. Okay? This war is financed through borrowed money. So $2 trillion today, and by the time we pay back the interest on those loans to fund this war, $6 to $6.5 trillion by 2050 is what's expected this thing to cost. So I'd say a long time ago, it overshot my threshold for what I think we should have spent in this mess. But, and as you and I talked, Ben, there's another aspect to this country that most people don't even consider. Why is Afghanistan such an important location, part of the world? I mean, it's like the size of Texas. But why is it that this little country is so important to the geopolitical and geoeconomical status of the world? Well, it comes down to resources. Rare earths, essential, one of which is essential to the production of lithium batteries, the production of computer chips that build what we call disruptive technologies.
That's right.
Laptops, mobile devices, GPS systems, precision-guided munitions, drones, satellites. All of these things make Afghanistan an incredibly important piece of territory, and in some cases you would think worth fighting for. I mean, that's a little bit off topic as to why we actually got in there, but we discovered all of these things, what a valuable resource Afghanistan is. And so who else in the world would be interested in these kind of resources for a country?
Anybody who needs, yeah. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Perhaps China. Perhaps China.
I'm also thinking Elon Musk and any of these car companies, because lithium batteries.
That's right.
That's why Elon wanted to go into Bolivia, was for the lithium. And you're right. Not many people know that Afghanistan is rich in lithium.
Well, they possess 60 million tons of copper, 2.2 billion tons of iron ore, 1.4 million tons of rare earths. And that's all of those cerium, niobium, aluminum, gold, silver, zinc, mercury, lithium. All of these rare earth, naturally occurring minerals dominate this country. And so, unbeknownst to many, China has already signed a 30-year, $3 billion contract with China Metallurgical Group to export copper out of Afghanistan. Afghanistan does not have the capability to mine these items, and China's already there. So you think it's in China's best interest to get us out of there? Sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm going to be honest with you. I'm sorry. I just want to say I'm going to be honest with you. Whatever the reasons, and there's a clip we have, Georgia, of Joe Biden discussing this before he got elected. These are one of the few times I actually have compliments for Joe Biden, because he's taking a lot of political heat to actually do what the last couple of presidents said that they were going to do, to actually bring that war to an end. And so let's run that clip quick, because I honestly don't know if anyone truly expected this war to come to an end after 20 years. Let's take a look at Joe Biden discussing it.
The Washington Post quoted you this week in a story about Afghanistan, saying that back in 2010, you said to Richard Holbrooke, the then envoy, "I'm not sending my boy back there to risk his life on behalf of women's rights. It just won't work. Not what we're there for." Is that how you remember it? Or what did you mean?
What I meant was there's 1,000 places we could go to deal with injustice. I can think of 10 countries where women and or children and or people are being persecuted or being hurt. But the idea of us going to be able to use our armed forces to solve every single internal problem that exists throughout the world is not within our capacity. The question is America's vital self-interest at stake, or the vital self-interest of one of our allies at stake? And the fact that they have a system in Afghanistan, as they do in parts of Pakistan, as they do in parts of other countries, that we're going to send troops to, because there is not, human rights are not being valued to the same degree that we are. That's a different story about sending combat troops. We should call it out. We should go to the United Nations. We should be saying, this is what's happening. We should try to shame and get the world to put pressure on, and economic pressure on people who engage, countries that engage in that, but not send troops. That's what I meant. It is not sufficient. That was my point. And the idea was, and I think Richard had said something like, well, women are being abused there. I said, they're being abused a lot of places around the world. Are we going to send our American forces all over the world to make sure that stops?
But then don't you bear some responsibility for the outcome if the Taliban ends up back in control and women end up losing the rights?
No, I don't. Look, are you telling me that we should go into China, go to war with China because what they're doing to the Uyghurs, 1 million Uyghurs out in the West in concentration camps? Is that what you're saying to me?
It was your quote, sir. I was asking you.
No, I know. I gave the answer. Do I bear responsibility? Zero responsibility. Mm-hmm. The responsibility I have is to protect America's national self-interest and not put our women and men in harm's way to try to solve every single problem in the world by use of force. That's my responsibility as president, and that's what I'll do as president.
Georgia, I want to throw it back to you and to you, Captain Barnes, but I wanted to make sure that we got that in before the hour was up, because it's rare that you hear very clear language, anti-war language from someone who's in a position to be the president of the United States, and then to see them turn around and actually pull the troops down despite the amount of political pressure that's being placed on them in the aftermath. And I'm sorry for interjecting, Georgia. Go ahead.
Oh, no worries. I was just going to ask Captain Barnes if he felt like, our troops being in Afghanistan is a way for us to leverage some type of deal on all of those resources that are there. Because as it stands right now, we've been there for other objectives, maybe that aren't so clear. But do you think that the commerce side is a motivating factor for why we've stayed so long?
That's a great question. And I think that, in the back channel somewhere, it has to be.
Yeah.
But I haven't read, or I don't think it's in our best interest to advertise that as a reason. Remember, we got in big trouble in Iraq when people wanted to say, the naysayers wanted to say, we were only in Iraq because of the oil. Well, we were in Iraq for a whole lot of reasons that were much deeper and greater than oil. And so maybe, on the backside, that the resources might be a reason why it's in our best interest. It's definitely in our national interest to be there. But I don't think that any of the administrations have ever focused on the resources. But I got to believe that thinking about the resources and the strategic and geopolitical advantages of being there, it's got to be there somewhere.
Oh, yeah, I will take the risk of doing the speculation and make sure no one lays it at your feet, Captain Barnes, because I don't see us, especially after getting Osama bin Laden. I do see America being foolish enough to think that they're capable of nation building, despite the capitalist kind of implications underneath it and resources and exploitation of those resources. America has always thought that it had the ability to go around the globe and build democracies and to modernize nations despite having complete cultural incompetence. As I was reading the Washington Post Afghanistan papers, there's just the level of knowledge of that nation that we did not have. It was so arrogant of us to believe that we had the ability to go in and simply build that nation. So when you say there are other implications, I would say the second biggest implication is the fact that why does America think it has the ability to build other nations when we're struggling to build our own nation?
That's a great point. And I think that we're kind of wired that way as a country, to think that we can do all things great and small. But the reality is, we do a terrible job of using the military to try and do peacekeeping and nation building. Am I still there?
No, you're here.
You're frozen a little bit there. So, as I've said before, the reality is the military does a very poor job of patting folks on the back and holding their hands. When you use combat troops, to interdict kinetic warfare. We do our best job when you tell us to go put warheads on foreheads. That's what we do best, breaking things and destroying things. We don't do such a good job of what we have. Certain parts of our military are community service and going in with the lioness women and doing those kind of things for public affairs reasons. But we don't do a good job of that. We are at our best when war troops are used to wage war, not to nation build and peacekeep and all those other things that we're not nearly well trained at doing.
I appreciate you saying that, because there's so many volumes of books about America spreading democracy. And we see that after 20 years of investments, and you said to the tunes of trillions of dollars that are spent in Afghanistan, we see now that the United States does not do nation building well. And as you put it, we go in and we break things. We do that well.
Yeah. That's right. That's what our war machine, we have the best war tools there is, the best airplanes, the best ships, the most accurate laser guided and satellite guided weaponry. We can put a missile through the third window on the fourth floor of the 8th building on the street. We can do all those wonderful things. But the reality is, when you look at this country, look at these clips. These guys are fighting in Toyota pickup trucks with machine guns mounted on the back of the bed of the pickup truck. So that is so low tech sometimes you almost get the feeling that our high-tech weaponry is too sophisticated to address this kind of. These guys are walking around with rocket-propelled grenades, with a shoulder-fired bazookas, and how do you knock that out with a laser-guided weapon? Besides, your laser-guided weapon costs you, $600,000 a piece, and this guy's round on a shoulder-fired weapon is about $60 a piece. So, I mean, look at that disparity. There's just a problem when you have to face this kind, and we're not well suited. This kind of warfare, which is not like the guerrilla warfare of the Vietnam era, where they're hiding in bushes and trees. These guys are hiding in caves and stuff. And those caves, the sophisticated group of caves and series of caves, make it very difficult to totally knock out that entire system. And so the technology difference is amazing.
Well, I know we are preparing to wrap up, but really quick, just one last question. And I agree with both of you. I don't think that we go into other parts of the world and do nation building well. It puts me in the mind frame of colonizing. I think America has clearly, historically taken on the role of colonizing different countries. But Captain Barnes, with everything that's happening in Afghanistan right now, current day, how is it going to impact America?
Well, let's talk.
Do we still have Captain
standpoints. Am I still there?
Yes, you're here.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about it from two different standpoints. Let's talk about the military members. I mean, my brothers and sisters that fought this war and lost 2,500 of their comrades and shipmates in this war can't help but feel that it was not a victory. I'll go as far to say it was a defeat, okay? The only war we really in history has ever lost was the Vietnam War. This was never declared as a war. Congress never signed war powers in this war. So it's not a lost war. It's a lost campaign or a lost whatever you want to call it. But the brothers and sisters that lost a guy or a gal on their right or left see this as a defeat. What about Joe Public, American on the corner every single day? How does the American people view this? Can they view it as a victory because no additional attacks on our soil since 9/11 has happened? And we've interdicted the enemy where they lie, and we cut off the Taliban. Well, there's no more Al-Qaeda in mass, but the Taliban is still there. ISIS is unknown, reduced or defeated quantity. So there's been some victories along the way. But when you look at the cost of this thing, I don't think anybody can look at this as a victory in terms of what it cost us in resources. And now you turn on the news and you see us running with our tail between our legs, evacuating our embassy with helicopters the same way we did in Saigon years and years ago. The thing that has to stick out to you is what was the error here? And the error here was not realizing that these people were not going to defend themselves despite the billions of dollars we spent establishing their police force, establishing their military, and giving them equipment. We never expect them to throw their guns down and run like a bunch of scared kittens when the Taliban came into town.